8 killed and others injured in Israeli strikes on Al-Wafa hospital in central Gaza. Jordan backs Syria's reconstruction, unity, sovereignty and stability through a Syrian-led process. And the Israeli army advances into southern Lebanon, violating the ceasefire and altering ground reality. It's 8 p.m. local time, and you're now watching Q News, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. Egypt has strongly condemned Israel's systematic targeting of Gaza's healthcare infrastructure, including the recent evacuation of Kamal Adwan Hospital, which was the last major health facility in northern Gaza. In a statement issued by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt called this a blatant aggression and violation of international laws and norms, accusing Israel of making northern Gaza uninhabitable to forcibly displace residents. Egypt urged international accountability mechanisms and decisive UN action to stop these violations, emphasizing the urgent need to end the war, halt brutal practices, and ensure unhindered humanitarian aid. Palestinian news agency reported the deaths of 8 Palestinians and the injury of others in an Israeli airstrike that targeted Al-Wafa hospital in central Gaza City. The agency stated that Israeli artillery shelled the upper floor of Al-Wafa hospital, resulting in the martyrdom of 8 civilians and injuring others, including some in critical condition. Additionally, an Israeli drone strike targeted an area near the displaced persons' tents at Al Yarmouk Stadium on Al Wahda Street in central Gaza City. The World Health Organization, WHO, has reported that 75,000 Palestinians are trapped in northern Gaza, with their lives at risk. The occupation army continues to destroy the infrastructure of hospitals in Gaza, particularly in the northern region. Israeli forces have focused their attacks on Kamal Adwan Hospital, setting it on fire and forcing patients and healthcare staff to evacuate under the threat of gunfire. The Ministry of Health in Gaza has announced the death of a 5th child in the Gaza Strip due to severe cold and a lack of heating resources amid the harsh conditions faced by thousands of Palestinians living in displacement tents. The 5 children passed away within a week, with doctors confirming that they froze to death as a result of the extreme cold in the refugee camps, which lack blankets and winter clothing necessary to protect against the harsh weather conditions. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health has reported that Israeli forces have carried out 3 massacres in Gaza, killing 30 Palestinians and injuring 99 others within the last 24 hours. The ongoing assault has raised the death toll in Gaza to over 45,514 since October of last year, with more than 108,189 people injured. Israeli media has reported that the Jerusalem District Court agreed to a request by the Israeli Prime Minister to cancel hearings scheduled for this week in his criminal trial, as he is set to undergo surgery today. It added that court trials are expected to resume next week, and Netanyahu reportedly suffered an infection due to a benign prostate tumor, for which he will undergo surgery to remove it. And for more analysis, we now move to Mona in our newsroom. To you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Hala. And for further analysis on the situation in Gaza, we're joined from Cairo by the director of the Strategic Forum for Thoughts and Dialogue, Mohammed Mustafa Abu Shamma. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Now, how has the targeting of hospitals, including the Wafa and Kamal Adwan, affect the healthcare system in Gaza?
Greetings to you and your viewers. Thank you for hosting me. In fact, the systematic military campaign waged on the healthcare system in Gaza, and which actually is part of the violations of the international law and the international humanitarian law practiced by Israel, undoubtedly it jeopardizes, or these operations jeopardize the population in Gaza and what is still remaining in the north of Gaza. We're talking about right now 75,000 people whose life is jeopardized in the north of Gaza because they are not going to have access to healthcare services right now. As well, the population over there is living through dire living circumstances and extremely severe weather circumstances as well. We have heard about the number of children that have died because of the freezing cold and the lack of heating systems and the lack of access of any humanitarian commodities to the population in the Gaza Strip. Of course, this is considered part of the Israeli war crimes and massacres practiced against the Palestinian people. And in fact, the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued a statement condemning the Israeli targeting of infrastructure in Palestine. And as well, of course, what happened on Al-Wafa hospital is a major atrocity that the international community at large should condemn. And of course, it's part and parcel of the genocidal crimes waged on the Palestinian people under the leadership of the international criminal Netanyahu, who is convicted based on a ruling from the ICC, and that's something we all know. In fact, in more than one Arab country, there are a lot of tumultuous situations. There are regional tumultuous situations that are right now seized as an opportunity for Israel to perpetuate its offenses. In fact, Israel wants to evacuate the north of the Gaza Strip completely from the population, the Palestinian population, in order to establish settlements and to instill military presence in the north of Gaza. In fact, the Israeli government right now is applying what they call the general scheme or plan, which is, of course, characterized by displacing the Palestinians from the occupied Palestinian territories in order for Israel to have the upper hand over these territories.
Now, how, Mr. Shamma, from your point of view, do these incidents highlight the broader humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
In fact, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is an ever-exacerbating one ever since the flood of Al-Aqsa took place. And right now, Israel has imposed full control over border areas in Rafah, and as well has been impeding the access of humanitarian aid. And when they finally allowed some access, they allowed access to meager amounts of humanitarian aid. And as well, they keep on bombarding infrastructure and hospitals in the Gaza Strip, which in fact resulted in a huge aftermath represented by a total collapse of civil services to the population. And as well, the humanitarian relief organization itself got targeted, which of course exacerbated the suffering of the Palestinian people. In fact, we're talking right now about almost 14 months ever since the war in Gaza took place, and most of the population of Gaza are right now displaced outside of their out of their original places, and as well they keep on trying to seek refuge in bodies of worship or hospitals, and they keep getting bombarded in these entities as well. We keep on as well seeing the children dying because of the continuous bombardment of different institutions inside of Palestine, and this is happening without respite. In fact, as well, we have seen how truces have failed over and over again between Hamas and Israel, despite the international community calling for a ceasefire, and despite all the efforts proposed by the international community and its different states. In fact, what we are seeing right now is a huge crisis unfolding and ever increasing in the Gaza Strip, and Israel, in fact, always circumvents the practices and the pursuits of mediators. Of course, Egypt is one of these mediators trying to establish a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And Israel just keeps on dodging all these pursuits and betraying all and circumventing all these pursuits as a way to procrastinate and to just prolong the offenses in the Gaza Strip until the president-elect Donald Trump finally comes to power in the United States. In fact, the war once more has been going on for 14 consecutive months without respite, and the situation over there in Gaza is beyond dire, and the population over there are just trying to stay alive and get by with whatever they have, but they don't have much, of course.
Right, that was the director of the Strategic Forum for Thoughts and Dialogue, Mohammed Mustafa Abu Shama. Thank you so much for your insights here, and back to you, Hala.
Thank you so much, Mona. And now we move to the latest developments in Syria. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi has reiterated his country's support for Syria's reconstruction efforts through a Syrian-led political process aimed at safeguarding the rights of all Syrians. This initiative aims to establish a new system that safeguards Syria's unity, sovereignty, security, and stability. In a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, both leaders emphasized the importance of preserving Syria's territorial integrity and the need for all parties to commit to the country's safety and stability. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has confirmed that Moscow is unaware of any review by Syrian authorities regarding agreements on Russian military bases in the country. Lavrov emphasized that Russia has not received any requests from Damascus to reconsider the agreements on Russian military bases in Syria, noting that the deployment of these bases is outlined in existing international treaties and complies with international law. Jordanian Minister of Interior Mazen El-Faraya has announced that approximately 18,000 Syrians have returned to their country from the Jordanian border since the start of the crisis. The Jordanian Interior Minister confirmed days ago that conditions have become largely conducive to the return of Syrian refugees to their homeland, noting that some may need a few days or weeks before beginning their return. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has reported that ongoing violence in Syria has led to further displacement. OCHA emphasized the urgent need to protect civilians and deliver life-saving aid. Earlier, 9 UN aid trucks carrying 200 metric tons of food from the World Food Programme arrived in Idlib, enough to support 80,000 people. Now moving on to Lebanon. Media reports have confirmed that the Israeli occupation army has been advancing into southern Lebanese towns in recent days, including Al-Adaisa, Al-Taiba, Al-Qantara and Wadi Al-Hajir. The reports indicate that while Lebanon adheres to the ceasefire agreement, the Israeli army is attempting to alter the ground reality by infiltrating these areas and creating a new fait accompli. This move appears aimed at securing greater freedom of movement and UNIFIL deputy spokesperson Candace Ardell stated that Israel has informed UNIFIL that it cannot guarantee the safety of peacekeepers near At-Taiba area in southern Lebanon. She added that Israel had advised patrols to avoid the mentioned location. Ardell emphasized that the safety of peacekeepers remains a top priority and affirmed that no actions would be taken that could expose personnel to unnecessary risks. Israeli media has reported that Israel is considering extending its military presence in southern Lebanon beyond the 60-day period agreed upon in the ceasefire, citing concerns over Hezbollah potentially taking control of the region amid the weakened presence of the Israeli army. The report added that Israel has raised the possibility of maintaining a military presence in Lebanese territory during recent high-level political and security discussions. Moving on to East Asia, where South Korea has shifted from rescue to recovery efforts after a Jeju air crash at Muan Airport killed at least 179 people and 2 were rescued. Flight 7C-2216 belly landed, veered off the runway, and erupted in flames, leaving only the tail intact. Protective-suited workers and soldiers combed through the area, while excavators cleared debris. The plane, arriving from Bangkok with 181 people on board, left only 2 survivors, both crew members. Officials presume the remaining passengers perished in the fiery disaster. The acting president of South Korea has visited Muan following the Jeju air crash. At an emergency meeting, he pledged full government support to address the disaster. Ministry records stated that the crash marks South Korea's worst airline accident in nearly 30 years and could become its deadliest. South Korea's acting president has also declared a 7-day national mourning period, beginning on December 29th following the M1 plane crash. He expressed condolences to the victims' families and designated M1 as a special disaster zone, which will enable state support. He pledged resources for recovery, aid to families, medical care for the injured, instructing agencies to mobilize all the necessary personnel and equipment. The South Korean Transport Minister has pledged to mobilize all resources for swift rescue efforts and to manage the aftermath of the Southern Airport accident, offering apologies and condolences to the victims' families and the public. He acknowledged his responsibility as the aviation overseer. He assured that the government will conduct a thorough investigation into the cause of the tragic incident. South Korean authorities and investigators are examining bird strikes as well as other technical and weather factors as possible causes of the crash. Moving on to Russia, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has stated that the passenger plane that crashed in Kazakhstan, killing 38 people, had been damaged by ground fire from Russia. Aliyev said that he regretted how some circles in Russia had attempted to suppress the truth about the crash of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane by spreading false narratives about its causes. Russian President Vladimir Putin has apologized for the tragic incident in Russian airspace, referring to the Azerbaijani plane crash on Wednesday. During a phone talk with his Azerbaijani counterpart Ilham Aliyev, Putin said that the Azerbaijani flight repeatedly tried to land at the airport in Grozny in Russia, adding that at the time Grozny was experiencing a Ukrainian drone attack and Russian air defense systems repelled these attacks. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has rejected U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's proposal to delay Ukraine's NATO membership by 20 years. Lavrov also opposed the idea of deploying European and British peacekeepers to Ukraine. Some U.S. sources have suggested that Trump is working on a plan to restart negotiations between Moscow and Kiev. The Russian Ministry of Defense has confirmed that its forces targeted Ukrainian military infrastructure, including airports and drone launch sites. The ministry reported striking 148 Ukrainian military sites, including the destruction of a military airport and a fuel depot. Russian forces also downed 4 U.S.-made HIMARS rockets and 104 Ukrainian drones. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported that the Ukrainian forces engaged in 100 battles with Russian forces on the front line. The frontline situation remains complex and tense, with Russian attempts to breach Ukrainian defenses being repelled by Ukrainian forces. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico said that his government may stop electricity supplies to Ukraine following the anticipated end of Russian gas transit through Ukraine on January 1st, 2025. Fico's remarks come after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed opposition to the continued transit of Russian gas through Ukraine to Slovakia once the current contract expires at the beginning of next year. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. 8 killed and others injured in Israeli strikes on Al-Wafa hospital in central Gaza. Jordan backs Syria's reconstruction, unity, sovereignty and stability through a Syrian-led process. And the Israeli army advances into southern Lebanon, violating the ceasefire and altering ground reality. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. I'm Mala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.